He's gone again. Interesting. And I think he'll probably just pull us on when he needs us, obviously.
We're live.
Oh, we are?
Hi, everybody. My name is Carolyn Garland, and I'm delighted to be here with Nicole from IAVE. We're waiting for Abhishek, the CEO of Gadara, to kick us off. We'll be there starting momentarily. Hi, Abhishek, are you ready for the workshop?
Yeah, so very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you joining us for the hands-on virtual volunteering workshop. It's great to have so many people joining us today for the session. I think it would be probably one of the very few times where so many people are joining in for a session on virtual volunteering. We have I'm just looking at the numbers. We have more than 1900 people joining us from 42 different countries, which is probably a really great thing to have, that there is so much interest around virtual volunteering across the globe. I'm very excited to have this workshop. The goal for the workshop is to share our learnings from a virtual volunteering perspective, working with different companies, both Fortune 500 companies as well as lots of small companies. And I'm very happy to have very distinguished speakers and co-hosts joining me today, and Platypus advisors and IAVE supporting us for this workshop. Uh, for the panel or the workshop today, we have Nicole from IAVE. Nicole is the executive director at IAVE and has been a strong supporter of volunteering throughout her career. Also incredibly happy to have Caroline join us. Caroline is the founder of Platypus Advisors, and previously was the head of CSR at Twitter, as well as the founding architect at the Taproot Foundation. Caroline is also a great supporter, advisor, as well as a mentor to me and Godera. So thank you so much, Nicole and Caroline, for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be there.
Thank you.
So our agenda for today is to start off with some key insights around virtual volunteering. Virtual volunteering has been used in different ways by different people multiple times. So just wanted to share more nuances and insights around virtual volunteering so that everyone gets a deeper understanding of what that means. Moving forward, we'll get into designing your virtual volunteering pilot and the strategy and a program design around that. And post that, the third phase would be on actually actioning your virtual volunteering program once you have designed it. So insights, design, action. So that's basically the three parts to this workshop. Actually, I'll start with some of the myths about virtual volunteering, and we have seen that a lot now working with tons of companies, that there are a lot of myths which have been there in the ecosystem, which we wanted to share nuances and insights on. The first one which people think usually is that virtual volunteering is a temporary phenomena because of COVID. And basis our work and what we have seen in the sector, remote work and virtual volunteering are here to stay. So even hopefully when things get better, still virtual volunteering would be something which would become mainstream across, and there are multiple reasons to it. And the most important and primary reason is a lot of the volunteers from across companies are good at things which they can deliver virtually better than doing it physically. So if you ask me, I'm much better at volunteering my time to help someone do marketing or do product management versus painting a school wall. So in terms of value created, virtual volunteering has tremendous value. Workforce would remain remote for a long, long time, and so this is something which will always be there. And the COVID crisis has accelerated a lot of this change or transition, which would have taken years and decades to happen. So that's the first myth. The second myth, and this is something more with a lot of CSR and HR leaders, is that it is okay to reduce volunteering hours in 2020. And the risk that you're taking is that your employees want to volunteer now more than ever. The urge and intent amongst employees to volunteer is at its peak, and the world needs help more than ever. There is a crisis which the entire humanity is facing. So given these two factual statements, it is almost impossible to reduce volunteering hours in 2020. The next myth is that virtual volunteering has just finite types and number of opportunities, and it's just mentorship, is this 1:1, but that's actually very untrue. Virtual volunteering, in fact, has significantly more variety because there are no distance constraints. Earlier, whenever there was volunteering which is physical, it was within a couple of miles radius from your place or your office. But because of virtual volunteering, it's borderless and global. So there's significantly more variety because of there being no distance constraints. And also, virtual volunteering is thought of more of, task and, 1:1 kind of a engagement, whereas that's totally incorrect. In fact, virtual volunteering opportunities are best done in teams because the value created is humongous. It's not just, it's obviously the social impact, but it is also employee engagement. It is connecting with your peers and the company. It's mental health. So doing it together as a team actually is very meaningful. And there are, in fact, tons and tons of virtual volunteering opportunities which you could do together as teams. And in fact, it is an experience. It's not a task, but it is an experience for you, your teams, and your families. And the last piece is that it is difficult and expensive. Obviously it's difficult because it's the first time a lot of people are trying it. But in fact, it's significantly more easier. It can be more scalable. It's more tech driven. And the most important thing is it's also cost effective, which means the cost of logistics, the cost of time taken to travel, a lot of different costs get saved, which can be useful and meaningful for the nonprofit. So virtual volunteering is, in fact, cost effective, borderless, global, and inclusive. So just wanted to share some myths about virtual volunteering, and share what are the actual facts so that everyone knows the layer and nuance below what is there on the surface. But there are also a lot of challenges around virtual volunteering, and when we work and with companies, we see a couple of them. And the first one, obviously, is that how do we complete the hours target in the COVID year when the world needs us most? Our numbers are not growing. So what should you do? The next piece is just around training and orienting stakeholders. Virtual volunteering is new for everyone. So it's obviously new for the company and the employee, but also very new for the nonprofit. So in terms of the technology and infrastructure at the nonprofit to manage and engage virtual volunteers is also poor. So there is a lot of training and orientation needed to ensure that it gets to a steady state. The next question is, where and how do I find curated virtual volunteering opportunities? As in, I want something which is for my employees in different countries, for different focus areas, skills based, team based, individual. So where and how do I find it is a key challenge. The next piece is, how do I manage hand holding and coordination? Because in virtual volunteering, everyone is remote at their own homes. If you were doing physical volunteering, 20 of you would go together. You could ask your colleagues, nonprofits, what to do and how to do. Makes life very easy. But in virtual volunteering, everyone is alone at their homes and it's a remote environment. So how do you handhold and coordinate this to happen? So that's another challenge. And the last and probably the most important is, how can you recreate the emotions of physical volunteering in the remote world? When you go out and volunteer, you feel satisfied, you feel happy. How do you recreate those emotions? And all of these challenges have now been solved, and there are ways to solve for this. I'm happy to share all of them during the workshop ahead. Uh, Before moving forward, there is a small survey that we had done, sent out this to a lot of companies to understand how are they navigating to the virtual volunteering new normal. And these are some of the results wherein, most of the companies continue to uphold their volunteering goals. And this is a trend which is increasingly happening now with the Black Lives Matter and the racial justice movement as well. Employees want to volunteer, and companies can't say no and shouldn't say no. So companies continue to uphold their goals. And the benefits of volunteering is multifold, and a lot of companies have mentioned employee engagement as well as employee well-being and mental health as two of the most important reasons, other than the social impact piece, for enabling virtual volunteering. In fact, it is one of the very few ways in which you could engage employees remotely in a very meaningful and a purpose-driven manner. And that's what virtual volunteering enables. And in terms of, we also asked the barriers to virtual volunteering, and the difficulty to find opportunities was the number one barrier that we got through the survey results. And we are happy to share this, post the session, all the survey results are done with a lot of large and small companies across the globe. And what companies have also told us, that once it goes live and gets adopted, it works very smoothly. So it's just the initial inertia and the initial, you need to cross that step function. And once you do it, it becomes very smooth. It's cost effective, it's scalable, it's global, it's borderless, it's inclusive. So it scales and spreads very fast once it starts inside the system. So before we, dive further, I would actually, take a couple of minutes to get insights from Nicole, given her work around the volunteering side with a lot of companies across the globe. So Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. IAVE has been the leader of volunteering since decades, and you yourself have been a great advocate for volunteering. So just wanted to get your insights and perspective on the new normal for volunteering, and what does the new normal for volunteering mean? So what does the pandemic and the racial justice mean for volunteering, and how are things changing?
Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you. And thank you to all the people who are joining us, those 42 different countries. So that's a great question. What does the new normal look like in this new world we find ourselves in? And I like to say the new normal looks a lot like the old normal, except in some pretty important ways, right? People want to volunteer. Employees, I think, want to volunteer for really three essential reasons. They want to help. They want to be part of assistance and aid to their communities. They want to see the values of the companies they work for put into action, and they want to be a part of a community. They want to be a part of a wave of effort helping to really address these issues. And I say COVID-19 and the issues of racial justice and inequity that we're all confronted with these days really only makes the purpose and the urgency of those three issues that much greater. You're absolutely right when you say, people are more interested in volunteering. They see their communities in peril. They see people around them suffering, and employees want to be a part of that. With COVID-19, we've seen that on display in so many different ways. But they also want to know, again, that their companies are really taking an active role here. Everyone wants to go to work every day for a company that really makes the world a better place and addresses these issues. And I think companies need even more so to really take these issues on, not just for their employees and for employee volunteering, but obviously for their customers and for the consumers and all of us who really are keen to see the values of the companies, of global companies. But I think the change in that part is, we are seeing certainly direct service, right? We've always seen volunteering through direct service, whether you volunteer at a shelter or a food pantry, et cetera. But I think some of the new normal here is, how do you volunteer to get at that systemic change, right? How do you volunteer so that you're really looking at issues of education and equity? And how can virtual volunteering or volunteering really help to break that down and to create new structures? Abhishek, that's the new normal that I feel like I'm seeing there. And then finally, this new normal of wanting to be in community, right? I think that's broadened, that people have volunteered because they've wanted to do that. But I think now they're thinking of their community as a larger space. It's not just their employees and their colleagues, but it's other companies, it's their families, it's their communities. So I think the new normal there is really looking at virtual volunteering as a way to not just engage your employees, but your entire community and your entire sphere of influence.
Got it. A lot of interesting insights on, how the new normal is, being quarantined but more connected. So, it's pretty interesting. Just on that, we as we began the session, we discussed a couple of myths around virtual volunteering, and given your experience around that, you've helped and a lot of companies on their journey for virtual volunteering. What are your take on some of the myths that we had discussed?
Well, I really want to support some of the things that you said. The first of all, the fact that virtual volunteering, this myth that virtual volunteering is temporary. Well, I think we've just sort of blown that myth out of the water. I think I've spoken to many companies that did not have a virtual volunteering as part of their portfolio before COVID-19. They tried it, they got through the learning curve, and they're telling me now that it's going to be an essential part of their volunteering platform globally. So I totally agree with that. It is not temporary. It's here to stay, and it's not only here to stay, but in a very authentic and vibrant way. This notion that it's okay to reduce volunteer hours at this time, as you said, why would you have that framework when the need and urgency is so great and the willingness of people and employees everywhere to take part is so great? I'm really hearing the opposite in some of the companies that we work for. In fact, that they're exceeding their volunteer hours. They're kind of blowing through all of their goals, and that they're seeing people who've never volunteered before take part in virtual ways. It's exactly some of the things that you mentioned, right? It's easier. It's more matched perhaps to their skills. Yeah. And they really do feel like they can make a unique contribution. Those are, I could rebut every single one as you have of those myths, but the only other one I want to just mention briefly is this 1-to-1, right? Because I've heard that one before. Well, volunteering is really only about 1-to-1, but I completely agree. Virtual volunteering is uniquely fit for purpose for team activities. And there's some really interesting ways that companies I've seen are really building that community building aspect in, making sure they brief globally, and debrief globally about the volunteering that's happening. Doing what we call power hours, where everyone around the globe is participating across business units, across regions, participating globally in a virtual session. So they're feeling even more connected to their community, to their colleagues, because of the virtual experience.
Got it. Yeah. I think it's great to get insights on some of these topics, given that you work with so many companies and engage with them very closely. And moving forward on that, also wanted to understand the work that IAVE has been doing from a virtual volunteering perspective. How are you helping companies? If there are any companies who are in the process of transitioning to a virtual volunteering world, what are some of the initiatives that you are driving?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We are indeed helping companies with this. We have our Global Corporate Volunteering Council. It's made up of over 50 global corporations. And IAVE is helping in a couple of different ways there as they transition. First of all, back in March and April, it was really that convening of that space to discuss. And I think you're going to speak about some of these things, but really to just give that space over to express the concerns, the confusion, the questions. How do I do that? To really help to build that. And then really examining inspiring practices, best practices, inspiring practices, as companies try to take on some of their virtual volunteering and as they help scale that. What's really working? IAVE is really helping to convene through the network to identify models that are really working. And then, of course, benchmarking those. What's working in particular sectors, what's working in particular regions in terms of virtual volunteering. And then we are also doing a large research we're in the midst actually of conducting a large research on corporate volunteering and the future of corporate volunteering, in which we are currently examining virtual and the implications of that now and into the future.
Got it. And what would be your advice to someone who says, getting started? What are the three things that they should do, if you're getting started on virtual volunteering?
Yeah, this is great. So we know that phrase, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So none of us planned to be in this situation, but boy, we are in it now. So one piece of advice is throw out the playbook, right? The one that you wrote in the end of last year about what you were going to be doing. It's not going to work, but really, be okay with that. Just sort of understand that we're in a different time, and we need to be creative, and we need to sort of let go of some of the expectations we had around in-person volunteering, and really I would say the second piece is embrace it, right? Don't be afraid. Be a learning organization. Test things out. Try them. I just spoke with a bank in Europe that did a program teaching people how to do yoga virtually. You wouldn't expect a bank to do that, but they're in this moment where their creativity is really allowing them to try different things and be that learning organization. So that would be number two. Don't be afraid. And number three, I would say be a good partner, right? NGOs are struggling too here, right? They're trying to make the same transitions that you are. Do it together. Don't be afraid to ask. How can we do this together? No one has necessarily the correct answers, right? But make sure that you're bringing that NGO along on the journey and being that good partner to them as you both navigate this new space.
Awesome. Those are really, really helpful inputs, and thank you so much for sharing them. We'll also share it with everyone joining us over email as well. And now we'll get into the virtual volunteering design and strategy workshop with Caroline. And I would request all of you to download the sheet, which has it is a worksheet for you to design your strategy. And Caroline can share more, but there is a link in the chat window. So please use that to download the worksheet till we set this up.
I don't know if I need to do. I don't know if I can do much of a workshop after those amazing words from Nicole. I love the idea of throughout the playbook, be creative, and be a good partner. And that's the workshop in itself. So, Nicole, thank you so much for your wisdom and fantastic words. Nav is an amazing partner for global companies I've worked with over the years, and just really appreciate your perspective, especially during this complicated time. I think it's definitely not survival of the fittest, but survival of the most adaptable. So here we are. Just the next slide. There are these headwinds and tailwinds facing. Sorry, we've got the definition of virtual volunteering first. So before we go into anything, there's a lot of jargon out there, and so we just wanted to provide a clean definition of virtual volunteering for this workshop. So this idea of being off-site from the organization, the idea is that it can be at many different times. We're going to get into time duration during the workshop. And then it can be working alone or as a team, are three components to a virtual volunteering program. And so just going into the next slide about the headwinds and tailwinds. We know that there are a lot of challenges right now. All of the companies that I work with are challenged by budget constraints, unknown futures, going from quarterly to maybe more long-term perspective, and then increase some political and social tension on the micro and the macro level. And similar to what Nicole and Abhishek said, there's still these huge demands for services, the unemployment, food insecurity, housing insecurity, health needs. There's a lot of need more than ever, both caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the highlight or spotlight being risen on racial injustice issues here in the U.S. and around the world. One thing that's not on this slide is also the mental health piece that Abhishek mentioned. As her family found, just sent out a piece of research that says half of the Americans are reporting an increase in mental health challenges just due to the stress of both pandemics, of COVID and the racial injustice situation. And I know that's not just unique to the U.S., but the mental health of our employees is something we really need to factor in, and the role that volunteering can play to keeping people connected during these challenging times.
Caroline, there is some feedback that your voice is not, very audible. So if you could maybe, I think it's a mic issue or something, but maybe we'll try again. You're on mute now.
Yeah, I don't know. If there's advice on what I can do to reduce the feedback.
Yeah, I think it should be fine. Let's continue. Yeah.
Okay, right. I'm hearing it as well. Let me know if there's anything I should be doing out of this. Because apologies.
Yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the next slide. This is a change framework that Platypus uses. And really in this is understanding where we are. And the idea of existing, adapting, and evolving are three key areas to help organize your thinking. And there's some parts of this that just existing is really the way it has been done in the past is the way you're going to be doing things now. But I really appreciate Nicole saying we need to challenge where we are and what we're doing and how can we adapt? How can we do things differently now in a new way and adapt? But also, if we're going to be throwing out the playbook, we need to evolve our thinking and do things in a completely new way. So I'd like to invite you all to think about where are you personally in this change curve from existing, adapting, evolving? And also just highlight the chat. It'd be interested in hearing where your organization is right now. So we want this to be an interactive session. So please in the chat share where is your organization right now? Do you think your organization in terms of virtual volunteering is existing, adapting, and evolving? And we're going to use the chat as an interactive session as we jump into the workshop. Abhishek, anything else I can do for feedback, or do you think I should keep going?
I think it's good.
Okay. The workshop. So we have an ambitious, interactive program that we want to go through. And the objective is really the idea of an object emotion phase emotion. So if you could go to the next slide about the workshop, that'd be great. I do want to thank all the people behind the scenes. There's some great minds that have pulled this together, both from the Gadara side and the Platypus side. Specifically Shibangi from the Gadara side, Nowl Rosen from the Platypus side has worked tirelessly to put this workshop together. We are eager in getting feedback on the workshop, and so any feedback on what translates, what works, what you need, please share with us, because we're hungry for the feedback on the workshop. And as Abhishek said, there is a complimentary worksheet that is something you can go through while we're going through the workshop that is more a tool for designing a pilot. So let's start with the pilot. Let's test things, as Nicole said, and move forward. So Abhishek, if you can move forward to the workshop output, that'd be great. Thank you. So again, this pilot, we're going to talk through 5 categories. We're going to click through them quickly, and then use the worksheet as a way of jotting down notes. With these 5 key areas for pilot, if you go to the next slide, metrics and goals. Metrics and goals is really around how much. Now, how much may or may not be the right place to start. It might be the place to end. But we see this as kind of a circle. But understanding where you are today and in the future, and we'll dive into that. Issue areas are what we'll get into. Who are you doing a pilot with and for? The program design is a big section that we're going to dive into of the how. And then communications, which is really internally and externally the why of what you're doing. And so it's a continual loop of continuing to measure. So for the metric side, there's a quotation from Einstein that I think matters, which is that not everything that can be counted, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that counts can be counted. And so I think that this is more around the input than the impact. Understanding where you are today, what your goals are around hours, participation, repeat volunteers, I think is really, really important. So are repeat partners. And then a lot of this being measured with an NPS score. So the NPS score is, would you do this again? Would you essentially, would you buy our product again? Would you be willing to volunteer again? Would you recommend it to a friend? And that NPS score can be really helpful in learning more qualitatively the employee experience and also the partner experience. So the be a good partner that Paul talked about, I think is really, really key. That tracking these for today and tracking them in the future, your goals, will be great learning for the input and also help you understand the impact. A little pro tip, if you cross-reference and cross-tabulate the activity of volunteers for your employees into your annual employee satisfaction survey, there's an interesting opportunity for you to reverse tabulate where satisfaction of your active volunteers are over longitudinally, year over year. And when we've done that, I worked with VRWorks, V. Bacalogro, and do this at HP year over year, we found that there were causal relationships between volunteering and satisfaction of your employees, not just correlative, but causal. So definitely measure and track what you're doing today and in the future, especially with the pilot. So this jot it down icon is showing you kind of where in the worksheet you want to put it. Okay, let's go on to issue areas. So I'm curious to show of hands of where you all are, if you are using the SDG goals to track your goals. This is something that's been coming up the past 2 days at the Pharma Summit, that the SDG goals are key. It's a blueprint of solving and tackling the world's largest problems. So if you don't know where to start, starting with SDGs is a really efficient place to focus, especially for your work with volunteering. It would be interesting in the chat for you all to share what goals you are doing, what issue areas you're addressing, if you're using SDG goals. Let's go on to the employer segment, Abhishek. So When you think about who you'd want to start a pilot with, do you want to do it by department, geography, employee resource group, leader? When you start thinking about this, you want to understand what are the skills they bring, the causes they care about, what are they doing, and, how are they motivated, and what are the constraints they have. So this is important just to know your audience and start shaping personas for designing the program that you want to do and the pilot is going to be launching. Let's jump into the program design. This is the meatiest area of what we're doing. Meeting employees where they are is something that's really, really important. I always talk about let's have a cup of coffee before you sign the prenup. So employees who've never volunteered before, Nicole mentioned that there are employees out there who are all of a sudden motivated to get up and roll up their sleeves and help. They're at home isolated and they want to learn more and do more than ever before. So there is a journey of engagement for employees, starting with discovery to awareness to engagement to creating these ambassadors. And that the more number of touch points you have for your employees, the deeper level of commitment and volunteering and engagement you can have. And this is something that's important because designing different programs for different people along the way is really key. Chris Jarvis from Realize Work talks about the tourist, the traveler, and the guide. And I think it's a great example of offering different things for different levels of experience. So let's make this real. Let's turn it to the next slide. And start thinking about what programs are you going to have for a virtual volunteering pilot based off engagement levels. So the activity duration would be different for each of these levels. Perhaps you have a one and done versus a half day, a whole day. There's short term and there's long term. But if you say, please sign up today for 2 hours every week for the next year, you may have people really say, gosh, that's too much for me to really start with. But if you say, hey, next Thursday, a bunch of us on the team are going to do 1 hour together, make it easy, make it fun. It's a good way of engaging people, but you don't want to stop there. The deeper employees are engaged, the more impact they can have working with your partners. But you need to meet people where they are. So here are some examples of different types of micro-volunteering to more skills-based long-term volunteering you can use. I know TIAA tomorrow has got a number of teams that are going and getting note cards, index cards, and everybody's writing the equations of the math equations, different things on the note cards from flashcards. They're working with the Boys and Girls Clubs around the U.S. To help kids learn about what they need to learn about in the fall. And so that's another example. But we'd love to hear examples from you. So again, in the chat, please share the examples that you have because we'd love to see more and more examples. And when we get to activating the plan, Abhishek will share more examples. So that's great. Actually, let's go to the next slide, Abhishek. So in the chat, what are other virtual volunteering activities that you're doing to meet employees at each level? And then in your worksheet, we want you to write down some activities you think are a good fit for your organization. So I'm going to toggle over to the chat and see if we have any examples. Thanks, Shivangi, for asking a question in the chat too. Excuse me. So the Zoom orientation service learning sessions is an example. Excuse me. I know the day of service was just happened at Twitter. The CEO, Jack Dorsey, also intermittently did interviews with different grantees throughout the day to shine a light on their work. And it was very great and engaging for employees and past employees to hear Jack interview these grantee partners. So education can be definitely part of the service day. It needs to be. Online research, child tutoring, for all possible as well. So please keep sharing in the chat. And then, Abhishek, if you want to just toggle over to the Well, it will be fun. We'll definitely use the worksheet to keep sharing examples. Now, Nicole talked about being a good partner. Just satisfying the needs of your employees will not make a successful virtual volunteering program, because you need to make sure that you're starting with the needs of the community, the needs of the nonprofit. And so working with a third-party person like Gadara, who can help source and understand what the virtual volunteering needs are in the community is really, really critical. I would start with existing partners. So existing partners you're already working with, you already have a relationship with, they're willing to pilot and test and try things. They may have capacity to explore if they have capacity to do virtual volunteering. And understand what the commitments are that you've made to them and keep those, recognizing and honoring in this time. There's even more demand on the nonprofit partners that are working. Now, if you're working with an organization like Meals on Wheels or an organization that may be much more physical than virtual, they may still have virtual volunteering opportunities that can accommodate you, but you also may want to explore new partnerships. So who are the new partners? What are the new issue areas? And if you can vet them yourself, great. You can also find a trusted party to help vet these for you. But really finding the partners to work with is really, really critical in this time. Next slide. This idea of proximity, Nicole mentioned, but reimagining what you're doing and where you're doing it. The fact that someone from Bangalore and Birmingham can be sitting next to each other and volunteering together can create a lot of cohesion across your company. And aligning the goals and understanding where the goals are for your backyard, your physical backyard of where your company or your employees work and live and where you operate, and also where the need is. But you can rethink proximity in a really interesting way right now and understand where your skills can be most impactful, which is something that Abhishek talked about in the beginning. Next slide. Communication. So internal communication is really key. I always say that recognition is a really durable resource. Thanking your employees, thanking your volunteers is really critical. But how are you going to recognize them? How are you going to incent them? If you look at Daniel Pink's drive concept of how it motivates people, the idea of mastery, autonomy, and purpose are three key things. And so interesting to find out what you have in terms of virtual recognition, celebration, badges, the dollar per doer program, what things are working now and what things could you create in the future to recognize individuals and celebrate as a group various milestones and achievements. In addition to that, the other side is external. So on the external side, really, how are you telling your data and your stories in a way that is most compelling to showcase your impact through your impact reports, through your employees as evangelists, and also through your partners, and having your partners share their stories and working with you as well. So we're interested in how you're tracking and reporting your process and systems to incorporate virtual volunteering in your program. And if there are examples of impact reports that you really admire, we'd love to hear from you what those are and how you're telling your story. And those stories will feed back into the measurements from the beginning. So it is definitely a circle that you rotate around from data and stories back to the measurement of how you're doing impact in the future. Next slide. So at this point, I'd love to hand it over back to Abhishek, but hopefully this has been a very fast, and apologies for the echo, way of beginning to map out and workshop and your outline for your pilot. What are you measuring? What are the issue areas? Who are you going to do the pilot with? The program design and communication. And we're eager to hear what you're creating and how you're doing it, because we want to learn from you about the innovation of how you're doing things differently to help inspire and inform the design for other programs for other companies and employees and leaders around the world. At this point, I'd love to turn it back over to Abhishek to talk about activating the worksheet and the pilot and the plan from his management from Gadara. He's partnering with many corporations around the world making this happen in reality. Thanks, Abhishek.
Great, thanks a lot, Caroline.
While we're waiting for Abhishek, if there are any questions people have, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to keep answering questions in the chat about any component of the workshop we just went through. I know it was a lot, very, very quickly.
Great, thanks a lot, Caroline, and I think really interesting points and something which in a very short duration, it's almost like a playbook for creating your virtual volunteering pilot or strategy or program design. So this will be extremely helpful for everyone, and you can download the worksheet, fill it up, and share it with us. Happy to provide inputs and feedback to make it better. So now moving into how do we get this program into action. So if you are a CSR or an HR leader and you have been tasked with creating and scaling a virtual volunteering program, how should you actually action it? And these are some practical steps to do it. We wanted to share it through a case study of one of the companies that Godera works with. For client confidentiality reasons, it's called Good Inc. It's a company with about 20,000 employees. The profile of employees is a mix of employees. So there are people in logistics and corporate functions and engineers. They are headquartered in the US but have offices in 16 different locations across the world. The key challenge for them was that physical volunteering is stopped, but there is a big push from employees and senior management to actually continue volunteering. So how should they go about doing that? So this was the problem statement. There are three key decision items that the CSR team and the leadership had to take. The first one is how to curate the best opportunities for your employees. Employees are different, which means different roles, different locations, different languages, different time zones, different interests, different preferences. So how do you curate the best opportunities? The second one was how do I get the internal processes and infrastructure in place to be able to manage virtual volunteering? So how should I ensure vetting, budgets, stakeholders, integrations, communications? And the third piece is how do I start? As in, we have an intended goal, but how do I start and where do I start and how do I know if I'm doing well or I need to course correct? So these were the three key decision items, and for each of them, we'll get to details. I just got a notification from my team that there are more than 2,000 people joining this session, so extremely grateful and thank you for joining us. For the Good Inc., there are different line items or different aspects towards virtual volunteering which they wanted to understand so that they could curate the right opportunities for their employees. So the first thing for them was trying to understand which are the right kind of opportunities to meet their goals. So was it to build stronger teams? Was it for skills building? Was it for just getting the volunteer hours target? Was it for creating larger and bigger social impact? So they just wanted to understand, okay, what is my key goal? And that will help me define the right type of opportunities. The next thing was the geography of nonprofits. So do they want to work with local, regional, national, or international nonprofits? So they decided, they want to work with international nonprofits from a high quality in terms of vetting perspective. Then the next piece was on the focus areas, on what kind of opportunities that they would enable their employees with. So one was, healthcare, COVID relief, education, environment, and they selected education. The next piece was to understand what is the time commitment that their employees would want to give. So is it a volunteering opportunity which is less than an hour, or less than a day, less than a week, or greater than a month? So time commitment was another parameter they wanted to finalize. And the last piece was the employee segments that they want to provide these opportunities with. So they have different types of employees. So which are the employees or employee segments, as Caroline had mentioned, that they want to focus on? So this framework essentially helped them, the selection of this helped them curate the right opportunities. So what happened was, once they selected these aspects around which kind of opportunities that they want to volunteer, the client of ours came to the Karma Hub, which is Kudera's virtual volunteering hub, which has tons of virtual volunteering opportunities across the globe. And basis that, they could select for the different countries, for different preferences, the best opportunities for their employees. They selected something on education, something with teams, something which was also skills based. So based on the framework, they could decide what are the best kinds of virtual volunteering opportunities, so that they could provide their employees with a great social impact experience. So the first thing was curation of opportunities. The next piece for them was to ensure vetting of the opportunities, and this is something which is important because most of the companies would do a non-profit level vetting, which is to see from a legal, religious, political perspective the non-profit is valid or not. But from a virtual volunteering, you need to do a volunteering opportunity vetting, wherein you need to understand what kind of beneficiary groups, what kind of activity formats, what is the content that is being used, what is the end deliverable, because based on that as well, there are certain risks for the company in terms of reputation, in terms of a lot of other aspects. So opportunity vetting, they worked with their legal teams to create a framework which helps them vet opportunities at scale. The next piece for them was to understand the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders. So inside the company, they also had volunteer champions. These were employees whose core job wasn't volunteering or CSR, but they were very passionate about volunteering. So they had a designed role called champions. Then there was a CSR team, and there was Kudera. So across the different phases, sourcing the right opportunities, driving registrations, end-to-end virtual volunteering execution and hand-holding for employees, and post-event support in terms of impact reporting and communication. They defined what is the role for the champions, what is the role for the CSR team, and what is the role for Kudera. That helped create a very robust process and infrastructure to make it a very democratic virtual volunteering experience while engaging all employees across the globe. They also focused a lot on integration. So integrating with Microsoft Teams was very critical, because that's been used quite a lot now in that company, especially from a post-COVID perspective, as well as they had an existing volunteer platform on which they wanted to load the opportunities. The next piece was to ensure communication collateral in terms of company brand guidelines. So they created that because communication is very important in the virtual volunteering world, so that you could recreate the emotions around physical volunteering. There's a lot of posters, emailers, videos created to create a great experience and emotions for employees. And post that, they actually created a three-phased approach to scale virtual volunteering within their company. So the first thing which they did was did a team activity with the CSR team, just to experience themselves what is virtual volunteering. Post that, they did a pilot with 100 employees, and these, a lot of them were ambassadors to understand, feedback from a lot of them to understand what is working, what is not working. And they had very definitive success metrics for the pilot: understand your employee preferences, make the process robust, get your champions integrated. And the phase 3 for them was to scale across geographies, where they also did a huge virtual volunteering drive. So this was like a phase-wise approach of scaling up, and this is something which we feel is very replicable across companies. So any company which wants to start virtual volunteering, you don't have to always think about long-term future. Obviously, you need to think of it, but you should start now, because the learnings will come. You need to pilot it out in some way or shape and form, so that you understand what is working, what is not working for your employees, for your kind of missions and goal, so that you could align the right kind of opportunities and create the right framework and infrastructure to scale virtual volunteering. So if you're thinking about when and how to do, the first thing is you should experience it yourself. Now, you as CSR HR leaders should experience virtual volunteering yourselves as a team together. Once you feel confident about it, and once you have a great experience, you scale it to a small pilot of a small group of employees. Once that's scaled and working well, then scale it across different locations and offices. So it's a 3-step process of scaling, which worked beautifully for for Good Inc. And something which a lot of companies can learn and adopt from. So this is what I wanted to share, just in terms of how companies first curated the right opportunities, got the processes and the infrastructure right, and then created a scale-up plan which starts small to understand what is working and not working with success metrics, and then scale up over time. So this is basically the 3-step process that Gooding followed, which worked really wonderfully for them. And if you want to learn more, we are happy to provide everyone who is part of the Karma Summit today to book a 30-minute slot with a Goodera expert to get inputs and insights from the virtual volunteering journey and build it for yourself. And we have shared the framework and the worksheet with you. If you could submit the worksheet with us, filled worksheet, we are happy to provide each of these companies a free virtual volunteering team opportunity, so that you could experience what a team-based virtual volunteering it is. But you need to submit the completed worksheet to us. So this is basically what we wanted to share today. Have certain survey results and challenges and myths, get to program design, and finally actioning virtual volunteering for you. So these are the 3 steps for effective virtual volunteering program. We are happy to answer any questions that you might have. And this is just the beginning of our our journey in terms of connecting with you all. Happy to be a part of your journeys as you scale virtual volunteering. At Goodera, our aim is to transform how the world volunteers and make it simple, engaging, and impactful. And happy to help in whatever way possible. So thank you so much for joining us at this session. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much for sharing your inputs and insights. And thank you, Platypus. Thank you, Nicole, for your inputs. Great to connect with you and work with you. So thank you, everyone, all the people joining us from across the globe. Thank you so much for your time and effort, and hope this was helpful and meaningful, and happy to help in any way moving forward as well. Thank you so much.